you so that we can do the recording somewhere in here is probably good.
That's
Thanks.
good. Yeah. Okay. Hi, everyone. Like I said, I'm going to maybe do a slightly longer hello to make sure volume is good. My name is Amy Slentz. I'm the Aquatic Invasive Species Program Manager with Finger Lakes PRISM for about a week and a half longer. Yeah, the departure time is a little bit painful, but I really wanted to make sure we got kind of off on the right foot for our season. So if you are interested in participating this year as a volunteer or otherwise, please register with us so that the future program manager can kind of keep track of you so you don't get kind of lost in the fringe. If you scan this QR code, it'll take you to a really simple Google form where you can register, and then we'll have your information. So when we do get another manager online, they can get in touch with you really easily. All right. Give everyone just a second longer. Scan that code. Okay, so presumably if you've been here for the PRISM meeting, you don't need this information, but for the folks online and for anyone new, the Macrophyte Survey Program is a program of the Partnership for Regional Invasive Species Management. That's what PRISM stands for. And I'm going to go through this kind of quickly, but the PRISM is actually a department within the Finger Lakes Institute, which is a part of Hobart and William Smith colleges. That's why you're here on campus today or logging in from home to be with us. So the point of the PRISM, really our mission is to reduce the introduction, spread, and impact of invasive species within our jurisdiction. And I've got that up on screen for you. It's kind of that central New York area, or really just the Finger Lakes region there. Through coordinated education, detection, and prevention and control measures. So we're often collaborating not only with other PRISMs, but partners just like all of you and just like folks online, community members to do all the work that needs to get done in terms of invasive species management. We cover 17 counties, all 11 Finger Lakes, plus Lake Ontario shoreline, the Genesee River, and, you know, in theory, all of the tributaries. So that's a lot of land and water, right? That's a lot of natural resources. That's a lot of coverage that our two-person EDRR team just realistically cannot cover themselves. And we'll get into this in a second. But that's why we came up with this program to help us kind of extend our reach a little bit as professionals. So that'll give you some familiarity with the program and with our organization. But really what we're here to talk about is the Macrophyte Survey Program. Okay, so our program goals with this are to educate, engage with the regional community, teach survey and identification skills to help report high priority invasive species. We do that through sampling bi-weekly, roughly June through October, throwing just the really basic technology here. You're just tossing a rake into the water body of your choice, kind of pulling it back up and see what you find on that rake. If you spend time in the FLI office, you will hear a lot about how this is not a perfect method by any means, but it is better than nothing, right? It is giving us a glimpse into those aquatic habitats when usually we would not have that insight. So this is your main tool here, along with your own personal device. So you pull up your rake, you identify plant specimens, and then you record what you find via Survey 123 on your phone, tablet, or computer, and you submit to program managers at the PRISM. Benefits of this program are not just for us, but for our community as well. So this makes EDRR more effective by expanding our reach as professionals through volunteer support. So for the folks online, EDRR stands for Early Detection and Rapid Response. So really, we have that team of technicians out surveying almost every day, you know, giving us a glimpse into aquatic species across the Finger Lakes. But again, that's a small team, right? I've already kind of talked through this a little bit. It's a very small team. There's no way they could get into all the nooks and crannies of the Finger Lakes region. trying to keep an eye on what's out there and detecting something early on, because that gives us the best chance at managing it well, right? Is if we detect an invasive population early on. So that's kind of the gist of, the intention of early detection, rapid response. And our volunteer base, our huge spread of volunteers over the Finger Lakes PRISM jurisdiction, you give us that reach into all the nooks and crannies that we couldn't possibly get to in one season with just our small team. It also increases collaboration efforts between us as professionals and the community and lake associations, municipalities, other citizen groups, school groups even. And we love that collaboration because it teaches us something as well. It provides that point of contact and an opportunity for feedback on invasive species outreach, monitoring, and management. I think in particular, the invasive species outreach, what is really landing with our communities and with our audience and what isn't. So that's really been helpful for me as a manager to be in constant conversation with all of you. And really this is my own take on it, and it's kind of special to think about. It creates an opportunity for all of you to become more connected and to learn about the aquatic habitat, that you kind of call home, if you will. A lot of our volunteers have property along the lake, or they have a favorite spot along the lakeshore or a tributary, and that's really important to them. But, how often are you really connected and, creating that kind of intimate relationship with place, right? This is our home. The Finger Lakes region is our home. So I think it's quite special that the Macrophyte survey program gives you an opportunity to get to know that habitat, to get to know that ecosystem. So it's been kind of special for me to think about when, pitching this to volunteers. So probably the folks in this room don't need this slide, but again, if we have new volunteers joining us online, I'm just going to define invasive species really quickly, because that term gets talked about a lot nowadays, right? We're talking more and more about invasive species, which is great. But let's just clarify what that means. An invasive species is a non-native to the ecosystem under consideration. So that's the Finger Lakes region in this case, whose introduction causes or is likely to cause economic harm, environmental harm, or harm to human health. And so I go through those things on the left side of the slide, what examples of what those things are. I think a huge impact here that kind of spans the gamut is the degradation of an ecosystem, because as soon as that ecosystem starts to degrade and fall apart, then a lot of other things follow, like ecosystem function and services. And I'll kind of explain what that is as well. But that's kind of a multifaceted function, and it's really important to us as humans. So, why does it matter if our forests are getting taken over by honeysuckle? We can talk about that in just a second. The characteristics of an invasive species. So they're not native, right? They're not from here originally. They didn't adapt to this region over thousands, millions of years, but they have specific characteristics that make them invasive, that kind of make them a problem for the ecosystem. They have really aggressive adaptations, including a high reproductive rate. In terms of plants, they're going to spread really quickly. If we're talking about invasive fish, a good species example would be the round goby, which is has a high reproductive rate, so lays a lot of eggs, and then is also very hungry all the time. So it also, in terms of plants, hardiness is a good characteristic of invasive species, or a classic characteristic. Maybe it overwinters better than some of our native species, meaning that it's just, it's ready to keep growing and spreading all year long. And our native species have that, have a different phenology, so they'll die back in the winter, and they need that time. But invasive species just kind of have the tendency to grow and adapt all year long. They also have no natural predators keeping them in check. So a lot of the species, we talk about an ecosystem, right? all the species that you see in one ecosystem are interacting with each other, and things are keeping each other in checks and balances, right? Things are predating each other, insects are eating plants, all of that. But an invasive species that didn't evolve here in this region isn't going to have those other species connecting to it, right? Keeping it in check. So it can reproduce at a fast rate, it can overwinter, it can kind of stabilize and not have anything keeping it in check, keeping it in balance. And along those same lines, it can reduce or degrade habitat, and then it can reduce resources like food for other native species, right? All right, so coming back to ecosystem function and services, I think this kind of helps drive home why us as humans, we should care about this. You know, we kind of exist at this higher level than some of these other species, plants, fish, whatever, insects. So why does all this matter? We can survive. But actually, as our ecosystem starts to break down, a lot of what nature provides to us will also start to degrade. And then, you know, our functionality as species also degrades. So we don't have to talk too much about this. We can get to the macrophytes, but it is kind of important to understand why we care so much about invasive species and about preserving our native landscapes, right? Once things start to degrade, we lose all of these things: purifying water, controlling flooding, clean air, biodiversity, soil formation, all that kind of thing, all right? So let's get you a little more familiar with the program before we jump into protocols. And then we're also going to go through some Macrophyte ID. All right, so this is the program through the years. These are the outcomes here. These 2 years are when I was the program manager. So very happy to say that we had an increased number of volunteers over those 2 years. In terms of coverage, we have, you know, from year to year, we'll get volunteers on different water bodies. So that has changed a little bit, but it's been over 20 water bodies every year. Some Finger Lakes have, you know, very strong presence, and then others tend to drop off. I would love to see more participation along the Rochester embayments, you know, of Lake Ontario, and also of the tributaries coming out of Lake Ontario. And last year we missed Honeoye Lake altogether. So folks online, if you want to spread the word to your neighbors on Honeoye Lake. So we are seeing all of these benefits over here on the right, all of those things, you know, very proud of. But one thing I do find as a program manager is that volunteer participation tends to drop off over the summer. We start really strong early season, and then, you know, the summer takes off, you're having a lot of fun. Surveys just tend to drop off around July, August, September. And then maybe when folks get my couple emails saying like, we can break 275 if you get out there, you know, we'll see increased participation. But what we really want is consistent sampling throughout the season. That would be ideal. This is our coverage, which again, super proud of. This is amazing. This is great. This is covering like every water body that I know of in our region, besides personal ponds and other smaller ponds, you know, maybe water bodies in parks and things like that. But this is basically covering every major water body in our region, with the exception of Honeoye, like I said. But we've had a lot of lake associations really step up to the plate and recruit on their own lake. So Skinny Atlas is one. Seneca Lake Pure Waters does a great job. Canandaigua does a great job. All that being said, you can see the gaps that I'm kind of talking about here, right? There were 2 points being sampled on Lake Ontario last year. You know, we had some volunteers not able to participate, which I totally get. It is a volunteer program. Those 2 points were from our steward team. So we ask that stewards participate and contribute to the program when they can, when they're not doing their other objectives for their job. But that's a lot of shoreline, right? And a lot of tributaries come out of Lake Ontario. I would love to see more participation there. And then you can also see some gaps around different lakes, right? Like the eastern side of Keuka doesn't have a ton of participation. Seneca and Cayuga, those are really big lakes. It's hard to cover all that shoreline, but you know, reasonably we can keep growing the program and try to cover those gaps. But really, really proud of how the program has grown over the year. That's a lot of coverage. And I know that our aquatic techs are happy about that as well. Okay, we are doing awesome on time. So let's get into step-by-steps. If you are participating online, virtually, or in this room, feel free to scan this QR code as I'm talking, and it's going to load. I mean, first you will need the ArcGIS Survey 123. So if you don't have that app, I would go to your app store right now and try to download that if you can. Once you get that downloaded, once you get the application downloaded, this QR code will link you right to the survey. Should be pretty seamless, but we can try to troubleshoot. We are doing great on time, so we can troubleshoot a little bit. But for MSP reporting, we use an application called ArcGIS Survey 123. It's basically a data collection tool, or really a form creating tool that's very customizable and just a little bit more intuitive and easier to use for community scientists, for people that aren't familiar with really tech-heavy, you know, data tools. So we switched to Survey 123 a while ago. And then whatever data we collect through this program, through Survey 123, it does feed into a statewide database. Maybe some of you have heard of it. It's called IMAP Invasives. It's actually another application that you can collect data through if you're so inclined. And we share our data with the team at IMAP. And then IMAP kind of publishes it. And so then it's public knowledge, which in my time here, I used IMAP invasives a lot just to understand, you know, what is the extent of populations out there in the Finger Lakes region. So all of that to say, your volunteer data directly helps program managers and other management initiatives for aquatic invasive species. So, you know, when you're combing through those mucky, dirty macrophytes thinking, why did I sign up for this? You are helping us. You are kind of directly helping our work. And then just so you feel like you got a little bit of a safety net, I can assure you that your observations are quality assured kind of every step of the way. Not only by the program manager in the past, me, I would try to go through every image that volunteers submitted. But just the other day, I received an email from the IMAP team that something slipped through the cracks, right? But that's kind of the benefit of having checks all the way through, right? So your data is quality assured not only by FLI staff, but staff at the state level. And we'll get into this, but it is really, for that reason, it is really critical that images are included in your survey, right? Because otherwise, how can I confirm what you are or are not seeing? All right. So these are the steps to download. I'm assuming I've given enough time to kind of get into that, but this will be posted online and we can share these resources. But this is how to access the app and then more specifically our survey form. And it is important that you download the new survey form, okay? Returning volunteers, it is important that you download the new survey form because I've made some tweaks that should make it a lot easier this year. So some essentials. Please note all the species you find on your rake, not just invasive species, but native species. The high priority invasives that we're looking for early detection, rapid response, those are really, really critical for us to keep an eye on. But we want to know everything that you find, right? We want to know how native species are doing broadly. So it's really helpful insight for us to know everything you find. Please note the sample density of your rake as well, and we can get into that once we're going through the survey step by step together. Again, this just helps provide some helpful context for the condition of the aquatic ecosystem that you're interacting with. This is kind of maybe a divisive recommendation here, but I would say it's easier to turn on location services on your phone when you are sampling. What that means is the survey form, the application can automatically populate your GPS coordinates. Some people might not like that. They feel like they're being watched or something, but I would frankly consider turning it on and off just to survey. Because it makes it really, really easy and it's super accurate. And, you know, accurate data is really critical for us. That's another topic we spend a lot of time discussing at the FLI is clean, accurate data. Along those same lines, speaking of location services, please sample in a generally consistent location. You can sample multiple locations, but please return, you can sample at multiple locations, site 1 and site 2, but please do not sample here one week and then somewhere else another week. Keep your sampling locations consistent because that can help us give some insight into phenology of an area, like what species are coming up when in the season. If there is an invasive there, when does that tend to appear in the year? Things like that. But it also gives us a reference point in case something wonky happens with your data. That just happened last season working with the IMAP team. We had to kind of problem solve. This person uploaded a point all the way in Pennsylvania, and then it was like, well, I don't know where to put these species now. It certainly wasn't in Pennsylvania. Or maybe it was, I don't know. But keeping your location consistent is actually super helpful for us. And then we can get into this in the next slide, I think, in the next two. Make sure your location marker is within a water body. Again, accurate GPS representation is really important to us. In case anyone needs help turning on location services, it's in your settings. And you can just kind of toggle it on and off. So you can play with that as like, if you don't want it on, you can be kind of intentional about when it's on and off. Okay, let's get started with step-by-step. Returning volunteers, I'm sorry this will be a little bit painful, but there are some new elements to the survey. So I'm just going to walk everyone through it step by step. I think I heard a lot of new volunteers are interested this year, so I think this will be useful. Once you get the app downloaded and open it up, you can continue without signing in. That's what this arrow is pointing to here. It says continue without signing in. It is very expensive to own an ArcGIS program. So it's really lucky that Survey 123 doesn't require you to have an account with them. You can just continue and you don't need a username or anything like that. It's going to take you to a screen that looks like kind of the second one here. And all the way down at the bottom is where you'll start your new survey. You hit collect. And you can be doing this in real time. That would actually be hugely beneficial. Folks at home, folks here, I would kind of follow along in real time if you can. So hit collect, and then it's going to open up a brand new survey form. This is like your data collection sheet. If you had a clipboard and you were out in the field, this is what you would be writing on. Fill in your sampler name. Please proofread. Again, clean data is super helpful for the eventual program manager that's going to be quality assuring all this data. Please proofread, make sure you spelled everything right. I know we're typing fast on our phones and we can kind of throw in some extra letters and symbols in there, but just proofread. When it says IMAP Invasives Observer ID, again, you actually do not need an IMAP account for this to be functional. It might be kind of hard to see here, but you can actually just use the numbers 8575, and that's kind of our general volunteer code, okay? 8575 is what you would put in Observer ID. Date and time should auto-populate for you. And then here is where it's really helpful to have your location settings on, so it automatically picks up your coordinates. This can also auto-populate, right? Your location can auto-populate. It'll just pick it up. There is an option, as you see here, to enter coordinates manually, but that's not ideal. Again, that could be a really easy point of typo or an oversight, and then it gets kind of confusing when we're checking the data. If you click on the box where the map location is, if you click on that map box there, it'll open it up larger for you. And what I just want you to be sure of is that your location marker, it's going to be blue, that little kind of pin. Make sure it is in a blue body of water. All right. You can drag it. I would be like very intentional, very careful, very nuanced about how you drag and drop, right? Keep it close to where you are. Again, kind of consistent, clean data here. But when forwarding all of this data to the state, if your aquatic invasive species, if your aquatic species is not in a water body, they're not going to accept that and upload it to the state database, right? Because that just doesn't make sense. Why would an aquatic species be on land? That has to do with like their search functions and how it gets tagged in the database and all of that. But if it's not in a water body, they're not going to accept it. All right. So just be sure that it's at least close on the shoreline, if not in the water body. Okay. So moving on through this survey. Like I said, you can enter coordinates manually, latitude and longitude. I would not recommend, that would not be my preference for all of you. You enter what water body you're sampling on. There is an option where you can input, there's an other option. So if you're not on a major water body, maybe you're just in your pond in your backyard and you want to upload some macrophyte data, that's fine too. There is an option for that. Maybe I'll stop once we get through the survey before Macrophyte ID. We can answer some questions online if there's troubleshooting. So you enter your water body data, and then there is a field where we would like you to give your best estimate of water depth. Now, typically what we say is if you have a sampling rake, the rope that your rake is attached to can kind of help you calculate the water depth there. So in the past, we've prepared rakes with like increments of feet on them. So then when you toss it, you kind of know like, okay, 3 notches just went underwater. So the water is about 3 feet deep, right? You could take some kind of strategy like that to help you guess water depth. Not super critical if you got to be pretty generous with your depth guess. But we do ask that you take your best guess there, all right? We can talk through maybe other strategies for that if that seems a little concerning for folks. And then moving on to the actual rake toss data. The density of what comes up on your rake. There's trace, which, there's none, there's 0, right? There's trace, which is maybe just a plant fragment. Sparse, I would say, is like a handful. Medium is a fairly full rake, and then dense is like you pull it up out of the water and it looks like you just mowed the lawn or something. It's really dense. It's kind of falling off your rake even. If you click on those reference images, they should enlarge. We had some trouble last year that the images were not syncing properly and folks couldn't see them. So let me know if that becomes the case. But you should be able to click on them, and that gives you a sense of like, okay, what does sparse mean? What does trace mean? New this year is we are removing dominant species from the survey form. That became really confusing for volunteers. I had people putting in like what the invasive species is that they found. I had people noting, leaving it blank or putting a species there and then not putting it in the total species present area. So we just removed it altogether. It's not a field that we, use in analytics very often. At least I didn't in my time here. So I just removed it so that volunteers were, kind of keeping a clean data form. So you don't have to worry about that this year, okay? One of the new improvements. Then you're going to start noting all of the species that you find. You heard me mention earlier that we want to know all of the species that you see on your rake. This is where it gets a little tricky, a little more involved. For every new species you want to enter, you will need to hit the plus sign, okay? Hit the plus sign. You see this drop-down menu of pretty much all of the common species you're going to run into. Notice they are all macrophytes. They're all plants. There's no mussels on there. We do get a lot of folks reporting quagga and zebra mussels when they come up on their rakes. That's very nice. That's helpful. But this is macrophyte focused, right? So these are all macrophytes. So this drop-down menu appears. Natives are in that blue color, and then invasives are in red to help you even further. You find duckweed, you find a lot of duckweed, it's all over, it's under your fingernails. So then you hit duckweed, and then you go all the way down to the bottom of the list and hit the plus sign again, and then you can enter the next species that you've identified, right? And you got to do that every time for every species you identify. If you have 6 that you find, you'll need to hit it 6 times. If you only find 2, just 2. Another new element here of the survey is an unidentifiable option to select, right? So unidentifiable could be, it's like so degraded, it's kind of dying off, I'm not even sure what this is, or I'm not sure what I'm looking at, I'm not that great at ID yet, I could use your help. A lot of times people will take their best guess. That's what we used to tell you in the past, is please take your best guess. And that was helpful, but I think it's going to be easier for the program manager to just quality assure the data if they know specifically what records volunteers are unsure about at the time they submit, right? So if you're just not sure, feel free to hit unidentifiable and the program manager can kind of help you out with that, all right? It'll send up a red flag like, oh, this person needs help IDing this species. So you go through, you enter all your species. If you select hydrilla or starry stonewort, you're going to get multiple warnings throughout the survey because those are 2 very high priority species for us. We can get into this a little bit later when we're talking about ID. This is what hydrilla looks like. This is what starry stonewort looks like. It's a macroalgae. The other is a submerged aquatic plant. If you select that you found one of those, you will get multiple warnings. It's okay if you think you found it, but it's just like, this is high alert. Just so you know, are you sure you want to click this button? No one's going to show up at your house, but we are probably going to contact you. So just so you're aware, you will see a lot of red text if that's the case. This was another piece that got kind of confusing for volunteers. You do not need to keep a sample. So you're throwing rakes and you're bringing samples up on land, right? So you can do the survey, but you do not need to keep or collect a sample for us unless it's a high priority species, unless it's hydrilla or starry stonewort. If it's an invasive species, I would just leave it on land to desiccate, dry up, decompose. But otherwise, you do not need to keep the sample. These are steps if you do need to collect a sample. These are the fields you'll need to fill out. But generally speaking, you should not need to do that. All right. And again, another kind of warning will show up. And here is one of the most important parts at the very end, submitting photos. So I'm going to go through right now what kind of A+ photos look like that help the program manager with identification and quality assurance. But just like the total species count, for every new photo you want to add, you're going to hit that plus sign. While I have a few minutes, I do want to note that some technical difficulties tend to come up for folks. If you're trying to take a picture within the app, that can be kind of difficult. If you hit the camera icon is what I mean by that, and you try to open the camera while you're still in survey 1, 2, 3, A lot of phones don't like that. So what I would do is I would just, kind of leave the app for a second, take all your photos with your camera as you would do normally, then come back into the app and upload them by clicking that file folder, if that makes sense. It just gets kind of glitchy otherwise and then crashes on people, it seems like. All right. We're almost there. Okay, so you submit all your photos and then all you do, it's a little anticlimactic, but you just hit this tiny check mark here. It's going to say, do you want to send your survey now or do you want to save it in your outbox? If you use data, if you use cell service, not just cell service, but if you use data out in the real world without being connected to Wi-Fi, you can send it at any time, right? Does that make sense? If you don't like to use data when you're not connected to Wi-Fi, then it's going to automatically go to your outbox because you are offline. So it's not going to disappear, but it is going to go to your outbox. So if you prefer being on Wi-Fi to use data, then at some point on the weekend or when you remember it, open up your outbox again and then hit send just to make sure you're getting all your surveys out. All right. Maybe I'll pause here. Are there any technical questions? Nadia?
I don't see any here.
Wow. I'm nailing it. My last training and
Is there a plant idea that you would trust or recommend if you're trying to identify one of these?
yeah, that's a good question. I wonder, so I've not needed to use one, but maybe other volunteers in the room have a recommendation. I would recommend Seek or I think it's PlantNet is one. Are there other ones I'm not thinking of? Anyone in the chat? Even Sam, yeah?
I think Seek is a good place to start.
Yeah.
Because they change so much shape, as soon as they come out of the water, it can be kind of tough for the reference photos that they use. But I think the best thing to use really is field guides.
Yeah.
I don't know if you mentioned those.
I haven't, yeah. That's
Field guide, just like a normal image is probably the best bet. Because there's not like thousands of there's like a couple dozen that it recently probably.
yeah, right. Right, I'm just not as familiar with what those might be, but Seek is a good place to start. And what Sam is talking about here is our field guide. Mentioned it in the partner meeting. Where am I on screen? This is our newly printed field guide. It's got some corrections in it, some updates. If there are other app tips, feel free to put them in the chat. But that's a great question. Yeah, you need some place to start. Oh, yeah.
From online. One is you show the code to scan again.
Sure. Yep.
And then thank you. And then there was a question about the in the updated survey 123. I'm not seeing the reference images in the rate cost density section.
Okay. Okay, sounds good. Yeah, we ran into that last year. Yeah, we can fix that. Good to know. Thank you, guys. Okay, I'm when the second hand hits the 9. Okay, moving on. So we have time to get to some ID here. Okay, so these are kind of A+ photo tips. These are like award winning, so no need to strive to this level of perfection necessarily, but it's really, really helpful to the program manager. This person, super organized, a woman after my own heart, I think. So she took a photo of her rake when she pulled it up. But as you can see, if you take just a photo of the rake, things are tangled together, like I guess I could ID Alodia, eelgrass, probably pondweed, which is everything else in the photo actually, but it's just really, it's a lot more difficult for me, right? And I'm not going to be totally certain that's what I'm seeing. I'm going to be taking my best guess. So what we often recommend is if you don't have to do your whole sample by any means, right? But if you can untangle everything and just show us a fragment, an example of each type of species that you're seeing, that's going to be really helpful for me in confirming what you saw in your survey. All right. Another tip is don't be afraid to get close up. And it's very, very helpful for me if you photograph on a clean background. So this is pretty good. Looks like a boogie board, a little flotation device. Even a dock, even the wooden dock in the background would be good. This looks like a Tupperware container, super clean. I can easily see the characteristics of the plant. I can even see probably some zebra mussels there. This was really helpful in IDing, confirming this is starry stonewort. And then our very own Linda Sampson. Linda, congrats being in the presentation for a second year. This is great as well. We're getting super close up. I know this is your Asian water milfoil. And on the right there is Elodia. And it was really helpful for Linda to get in there and kind of zoom in to see the leaf edges, right? To see the leaf margins. And we'll get into why that's important. But this helps me differentiate that it's Elodia versus Hydrilla. And Hydrilla is kind of our #1 priority in this program. So I'll just kind of go back through those again. Organized, clean, close up. Those are the real takeaways there. Doesn't have to be every single piece you have to untangle, but I just need to reasonably be able to see what you're seeing. Okay, in the last 15 minutes, which is kind of par for the course, I'm going to go through kind of the top macrophyte identification. In our steward training, we spend 2 hours going through species identification. So this is going to be kind of quick and dirty, but for 2 years with this program, I kind of have gotten a sense of what would be most helpful for all of you. So I tweaked the presentation a little way in that. For those of you that don't know, a macrophyte is a plant large enough to be seen with the naked eye growing in or around water. So it's basically just an aquatic plant, but macrophyte is the technical word. Some characteristics you should keep an eye out for, just, that will help you with ID. If you've never done this before, probably most people in this room have familiarity with, keying out species. The size of the plant, the number, the arrangement of the leaves, the margins, the shape of the leaves, the stem, shape and color. Purple loosestrife has that square stem, et cetera, et cetera. Roots, Hydrilla has tubers, right? So that's a key characteristic that we can use to differentiate if the plant hasn't leafed out yet. Flowers, timing, color, petal number, that's kind of an obvious one for all those gardeners out there. And then seeds and fruits. This is found in our field guide and will be made available to volunteers. So this walks you through leaf shapes, the types of leaf margins, branching patterns, leaf arrangements. So this is really, really helpful in helping understand what do you mean exactly by leaf shape, leaf arrangement, leaf margin. That's what we're talking about here. And again, this is kind of redundant, but a tuber is a thick root portion at the bottom of the plant. So yeah, it's basically a type of root, but it provides food storage over the winter. Hydrilla can overwinter really well because it grows from tubers, right? And maybe the only other one that we haven't covered already is turion. So a turion is a vegetative bud. There is one macrophyte that kind of uses that to its advantage. And it basically can reroot itself and become a whole new plant with a turion. All right, growing habits, and this is the last one. We'll get into ID here pretty quickly. But just so you're aware, there are different growth habits of macrophytes. So not only the submerged or submersed, which might kind of come to mind first, obviously, But there's floating leaved or free floating. Water chestnut is a great example of that, right? But emergent plants as well. And emergent means that it comes up out of the water. It emerges above the water surface, right? All of those can be considered macrophytes. There's a lot of resources out there to help you get familiar with macrophytes. I have a copy of Through the Looking Glass. It's really fun to honestly just kind of flip through sometimes. But there are tons and tons of materials out there, including the 2025 MSP resource package available online starting today. In this folder, you'll get the handbook, the previous welcome letter, a past newsletter, so you have a sense of what kind of communications you might receive. There's also some helpful materials in there. There's app recommendations to your question earlier, sir. There's app recommendations in that newsletter. There's ID tips, other things in that newsletter. Hopefully the program manager maybe can get back to that, but if not, that gives you a taste of what that might be. And then of course, kind of maybe most importantly are the helpful field guides. And I made digital copies of all my favorite content and put it in there for you. Okay, so please use the resource package. All right, let's do it. 10 minutes. Some common ID, and I've got lookalikes up here because I think that'll be most helpful. So starry stonewort is a macroalgae. It kind of grows in these long, stringy branchlets. It's kind of cylindrical, has blunt tips, and it is arranged in whorls around the stem. If you're lucky enough to pull it up and its kind of root structure comes with it, it's called starry stonewort because these little star bulbils come up with it, right? But they're really, really tiny. I'm putting another reference photo up there. They're super small. If you're lucky enough to pull those up, that's kind of your key characteristic. What it is often mistaken for is Chara. All right, and Chara is actually a native species. An easy way to tell them apart is if you crunch Chara in your hand or between your fingers, it smells like garlic or has like a skunky smell. Starry stonewort is also gonna pop. It's based on its structure. It's gonna kind of crunch and pop, but it's not gonna have that smell once you do that. This is another slide that I borrowed from one of our partners here in the Northeast, but I think this is really, really helpful, a side-by-side comparison. So all the way to the left is starry stonewort, really stringy, really kind of gangly. That is the non-native starry stonewort. Next to it is Chara. You can see where you might get confused, right? Especially if the branches kind of break off, if those long stringy pieces tend to break off, you might be left with, something more central like this. That kind of looks like Chara, right? And other types of Chara species. There are native stonewort species. I'm not super familiar with them, but that's what we're showing all the way over on the right there is an example of what a native stonewort species might look like. But again, very, very different than the starry stonewort, right? Okay, another common ID here is coontail versus Eurasian water milfoil, or you can kind of compare them, from slide to slide even if you want. So Chara could kind of be mistaken for coontail and so on and so forth. Coontail is a native species. I'm highlighting, the end of one of those branches and the way the leaf and leaflets kind of come together. It looks like a raccoon's tail, right? That's why it's called coontail. An easy way to identify coontail, though, is it's kind of bristly. It's got really toothed leaves, but coontail has that fork in its branch right there. Do you see that in its leaf? It's got that Y fork. That doesn't happen with other species. So that's kind of a telltale for coontail. It's also a fairly rigid plant. A lot of these macrophytes might kind of fall apart or like kind of droop when you bring them out of the water, but coontail is going to stay pretty rigid. All right. Eurasian water milfoil is probably a species that all of the volunteers are going to run into. It has very finely divided leaves that are referred to as leaflets. So a single one of those threads is a leaflet, which creates one leaf. Eurasian water milfoil is kind of easy to tell from native milfoils, probably because native milfoils have been kind of, pushed out. But it also, Eurasian water milfoil has kind of a red tinged stem there. And Eurasian water milfoil has a blunt tip at the end of one of those entire leaves. So all of the leaflets kind of come together and it looks like it got like a bad bang trim, right? It just kind of got clipped at the end. It's got a very blunt tip. That's how I can kind of tell the difference. I mean, the red stem is often pretty present, but that blunt tip there tells me it's Eurasian water milfoil. Here's a series of tricky ones. So fanwort, water buttercup, and water marigold. They actually trip me up often. When volunteers put fanwort in the survey, I also kind of freak out as if it was hydrilla because fanwort is not very present in the region. So this took me a lot of practice. Fanwort is its opposite paired. It also has finely divided leaves like you see there. But that paired piece is very important. Okay, so the leaves branch out and make like a Y shape on either side of the stem, right? And that's different, as I'm noting here, I've kind of got it circled. That's different than the buttercup and the marigold. So that's the branching pattern. Again, if we're talking back to characteristics, why they're important, that branching pattern is really, really critical here. So fanwort has that paired division, kind of branches in a Y. Water buttercup is alternate. So it branches to the right, up the stem, branches to the left, so on and so forth. But again, you can see here, very finely divided leaves. It can get kind of confusing. And then with water marigold, it is the branches are whorled around the stem. So this is actually kind of a cross section, if you will, which is different than that Y pattern, right? But the fanwort, when you have it underwater and it kind of creates that finely divided fan shape you see there, can kind of be alarming. Water marigold looks a lot similar. All right, so branching pattern is important here. And here's one that we really want to pay attention to, Elodea versus hydrilla. So hydrilla is one of our top priority species. Elodea is pretty present in a lot of water bodies. So looking very similar here. But Elodea is going to be smooth edged and the leaves are often arranged in whorls of 4 to 6, I think. In Linda's photo, let's see, 3. So that's kind of unique. But Elodea has that smooth edge, usually arranged in whorls of 4 to 6, and they kind of get more crowded near the top. You see how they kind of get a lot denser there. They create kind of that interesting leafing pattern. So hydrilla is an invasive species looking very similar, but I have kind of a close up here. Those leaves are finely serrated. And that's kind of the key characteristic for us. You can put it under a microscope and find some other things like that reddish mid-rib there on the leaf. And most often in our region, we're going to see that hydrilla leafs out in whorls of 5 around the stem, but it can be whorls of 3 to 8. Okay, so those are often confused with each other, but I would say pay close, very, very close attention to that serrated edge. Pondweeds are almost definitely going to trip some of you up. There are a lot of native pondweeds, but I will, instead of going through all those, I will give you one key pondweed, invasive pondweed to keep in mind. And hopefully that kind of clears the air for a lot of you. But pondweeds can look very similar to naiads, a different type of macrophyte. And, you know, again, so brittle or spiny naiad has a very specific look to it. Kind of bushy, creates these sort of like pom-poms almost, but the leaves are kind of spiky, very stiff and bushy. So again, paying attention to the leaf shape, whereas a lot of pondweeds, they're going to have those smooth edges, and certainly different leaf shapes, except for curly leaf pondweed is the one that I think you should get familiar with, which will help you kind of differentiate from a lot of the native species. So curly leaf pondweed is pretty easy to identify once you get familiar with it. You know, we teach our stewards that it is the lasagna plant. The leaves look a lot like lasagna noodles. This is invasive. So it's going to be fairly rigid, kind of a reddish color usually. And then again, super wavy leaves and finely toothed margins, kind of like hydrilla. So you could maybe mistake the two in your survey, which is not unheard of, because it's got those finely serrated edges as well. All right, so a real-time example of what a turion is. This is a turion. That middle one there for folks online. Vegetative bud. All right, so if you get familiar with curly leaf pondweed, I think that'll help you differentiate from the native pondweeds, but there are a lot of resources in that digital package that should help walk you through pondweed identification as well. So that is the super quick and dirty ID portion. Like I said, we spend 2 hours with our stewards going through Macrophyte ID and other types of ID, but this should get you started. These are kind of the main takeaways, I think, what you're going to run into most often. So I think getting familiar with those is a strong start. And then, you know, please use the resources. Are there any questions, comments online? Yes.
Just a quick one.
Yeah, sure.
If you have the choice to go out in any depth, you know, all the way out, is there a marker you should go by, and should you be at that exact location each time you take a survey? Oh, sure. That's a good question. I thought you were headed in a different direction, which I will also touch on. I would say if you can, you know, kind of get some wayfinding down and be generally in the same vicinity, that would be helpful. If you're paddling out, it's like, okay, I'm straight out from this oak tree here or what have you, you know. I would say sample if you're on the shoreline, if you can get a little ways into the water, that's helpful. Macrophytes aren't really going to grow, you know, in just a couple, I mean, maybe a couple inches of water. You also don't have to go out past like 30 feet. Josh, you have a, yeah. So within that threshold, there's no reason to be like in the middle of Canandaigua Lake trying to throw your rake. But if you see some banding, like vegetation that tends to grow in a certain area off a dock,
Yeah,
then should that be go for the highest density?
let's see what it is. Yeah, definitely. That's a great spot. Yes.
There was a question here online about how can we access the resource packet?
So if you, it's going to take me a while to scroll back, but if you are registering online, the link to the resource package is going to be nested. Is going to be nested in that Google form. It's going to appear in multiple places in the Google form. So you can click on it. I would bookmark it. And it should be public access. If anyone has trouble accessing, let us know. It is not public.
That's request access.
Okay. That's strange, but I will double check.
It might just be a permission setting.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I will double check.
Alternatively, we will make it available on the website. All right. Thank you very, very, very much, everyone. Good luck.
New adventure.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thanks. Yeah. If you need any scientific illustration, let me know. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Happy sampling.
Yes. Thanks, Amy.
Thanks.
All right, everyone, that concludes our program for the day. We'll be sticking around for a couple minutes to answer questions or chat, but in general, see you later. Keep an eye out. We'll be bringing on new folks in the next couple of weeks, so keep an eye out for that. We'll probably be connecting them with broadly across our partnership network. So thank you. Take care. Have a good week.
Content about the spotted lantern.
Oh, I don't have it here, unfortunately, but it is available online. You can Google it pretty easy. Hey, Bruce. Take as many of those if you have people that want to take them.
One for myself, one for Sharon and Dorothy.
Ah, good. All right, cool. Found it, but I'll have to stop share. Okay, I actually need to stop
Okay.
recording.
Yeah, well.